I'm Melinda Marino. We're here at Esencia Yoga Spa Retreat. A dream that has been manifested into reality, actually. After 25 years of dreaming about this space, it now exists. Here in San Miguel de Allende. It's a registered yoga school. I offer teacher trainings here. We have a spa that's set up to cater to healing, not just the physical body, but the emotional, mental body as well. So it's a little different from most commercial spas, as we approach things from an energetic aspect, with the yoga being our main focus here. We teach hatha yoga classes, hatha flow, we teach vinyasa. We also teach yoga trapeze, which is a lot of fun. So most of our spa clients come from a yoga practice. So the depth of what the work they need on their bodies, their body work, is much deeper than the general public. So the healing aspects of the spa are integrated with the healing aspects of the yoga practice. This is sort of, let me go sort of back now from there, because this is like really a culmination of 25 years of dreaming. And here it is. I still don't believe it. I have to pinch myself still. The path of yoga, I was drawn to it from a martial arts background. I was practicing martial arts in the 80s, in the early 80s, when I graduated high school and went on to college. I studied architecture, and my passion really was in the martial arts when I wasn't studying. And I loved it. I practiced Aikido for 10 years. And in the beginning, it was very physical. But all I was drawn to was, I need to practice yoga to better my martial arts. I need to get into the yoga practice to better my martial arts. And I thought that was the only reason I was going to practice yoga. So ultimately I got into a yoga studio, which took me about 10 years thinking about it, honestly. I saw the school, I walked by it, time, school, martial arts. I got into the yoga practice, and within 6 months, I noticed a huge difference in my back. I already had major back issues by the time I was 25 from several car accidents, slip and falls. So in the first 6 months, I realized, wow, my back feels a lot better. And then the focus and balance that I got from the yoga practice translated into the martial arts practice and did make my martial arts better. But then I sustained an injury. I had a 200-pound guy land on my knee sideways, like a football injury, and down on the mat I went, and off the mat in Aikido I went for a while. But I stayed on the yoga mat, and with 6 months of rehabilitation type perspective in my practice, therapeutic approach in my yoga practice, I rehabilitated my knee. So first 6 months noticed a difference in my back. Also in the first 6 months of practicing yoga, I noticed that the fibromyalgia I had been living with was dissipating. So I got more and more curious. Then the knee injury came, rehabbed that. Then I became an addict to the yoga path. So I transferred all my discipline from martial arts into the yoga discipline. And I was also like, I just turned 30. I was like, I could be a little nicer to my body. Being thrown around on the mat in my 20s was a lot of fun, and I was resilient. But I thought, let me be kinder to my body. So I did. I let go of the discipline of martial arts, and I transferred it all into the mat of yoga, the path of yoga. And with that, I studied with Jimmy Barkan, who was my home teacher, and he was a Bikram teacher, a straightforward classic Bikram teacher, hatha. And with a couple years of practice, he said one day to me, "Would you like to teach?" And I was honored, felt like, oh wow, that's really wonderful. But what does it take to teach? What does that mean? He said, well, you need to have a good practice. You need to inspire people, which you do, and then you just need to study and learn how to teach the poses and learn anatomy and philosophy and all of that. Well, in those days, like talking about the olden days when there weren't teacher trainings on every corner of your town or every corner of the world. You had to travel and you had to go live where you did teacher trainings. So that took me a little while to do that. But he said, you should go do the Bikram training. So I did the Bikram training, 2 months long, practicing yoga 5 days a week, twice a day. We didn't sleep, we hardly ate. It was intense, and it was good. It was one of the most intense trainings out there at the time, and I think it still is. And I put that in my pocket or in my tool belt, and I started teaching when I came back to my home school. I started teaching straightforward Bikram, classic Bikram, for 10 years. And I was able to have the opportunity to teach about 150 students a day in different arenas, yoga schools, gyms, country clubs, spas. And with that, I got a whole lot of different kind of students that were presented to me. Some were really fit in the gym, really strong, but they weren't flexible at all. Or the yogi in the yoga schools were really flexible, but they weren't strong. So you need both. And then when I taught in the country clubs and spas, it was an older clientele that played golf and tennis and had all these injuries from being very one-sided in their body. Lots of carpal tunnel, tennis elbow, tendonitis, lower back problems. And I could relate to all of that as well because of my injuries. So I became very interested in alignment and therapeutic approach of the practice and how it can help people heal their injuries. But those kind of things made me think, oh wow, this stuff really works. I know it healed my back. I know it healed my fibromyalgia. I know it rehabbed my knee faster than I would have in any other probably modality. And also being consistent and practicing every day makes a huge difference. You know, it's like water. It's really good for us, but you got to drink it. You know, yoga practice is really good for us, but you got to get on the mat and do it. And you also got to find the right studio, the right connection with a teacher. You mentioned that before. It's important that you're on sort of the same path. You know, if I wanted to be a therapeutic yoga teacher, I need students to come that are wanting that same path. If I have students wanting to be very physically fit, well, I need to teach that style for them to connect with me. So over the years, I've been able to teach all of those and keep the evolution going. Yoga practice is for everyone. It's a very intimidating thing today to see so many people out there posting so much on Instagram and all the social medias and photos and magazine covers and everything, and it's always in, you know, you've got to have the right clothes and you've got to be thin and you've got to have amazing poses, and so that is a small majority of the people that actually practice yoga. That's just marketing, the image of it all. The whole general population can be practicing, but they're intimidated. So I've tried to create a space that allows people to come in and not feel intimidated. Doesn't matter what kind of clothes you wear, what kind of car you drive, you know, get in and get on the mat. Try it out. I cater to holding people's space for them to feel safe and comfortable, and then advance them through this path as their body allows them, as their mind allows them. This muscle is the hardest one to retrain. This one's like really stiff. You know, you gotta be open to it. The meaning of the word yoga is union. Mind, body, spirit, union with God, self-realization. There are 8 limbs or 8 tools that can help us get there. And postures or asana is only one of them. You know, and it's really only 10% of this path. And it was created by Patanjali thousands of years ago, like more than 4,000, to strengthen the spine so that you could sit up straight, so that you could then go to another tool, which is meditation or dhyana. But if your body's going, oh, my neck hurts, my back hurts, you're not going to get a solid meditation practice. And that's only 2 tools. There's 6 more. And pranayama, the breathing's another really important one. I really focus on those 3 in my classes. Those 3, because we've only got an hour to then 15 minutes, call it 75 to 90 minutes in a typical classroom. And that's another thing over the years, people are like fitting it into a gym schedule. Oh, well, it's an hour-long yoga class. An hour-long yoga class is like putting food in the microwave and expecting the same benefits as if you put it on the stove and stewed it all day long. It's a discipline. It's a discipline. You should get on the mat, practice, lay aside an hour and a half a day. I know it's challenging for a lot of people, but the benefits are worth it. You sleep deeper. You don't need as much sleep. You're more focused. You do things with more efficiency because you're more focused. You're not dragging at the half the day, that moment after lunch where you're like, I just want to go home and take a nap. No, you're still on. So you're much more productive, much more efficient. So mentioning all of that to give us a perspective of how do we find time in a day to do an hour and a half yoga practice, or at least 75 minutes. Tricky. So when I have someone walk in new to the studio and they ask me, I'm brand new, what class should I take? I kind of try to make it more like a speedometer on a car or a gauge. Yeah, some are really geared more for beginners, and some are geared more for advanced practitioners. And somewhere in the middle is where the majority of the general public practices. So as a beginner, a Hatha class, if we define it as Bikram's Hatha Yoga, beginner's Hatha Yoga, it's a pose and then a pause and a pose and then a pause. You could say that'd be a good place to start for a beginner. And in the middle, being beginner into intermediate, you might say a Hatha flow pace would be nice. Meaning, and this is my personal description, that you flow 4 or 5 poses together in a sequence and then pause in a mountain pose. And then flow 4 or 5 more poses together and then pause in a mountain pose. And then from there you can work your way up to what's called vinyasa or power yoga, where there are no pauses. You come in the room, you get on the mat, you start with some sun salutations, you get warmed up, you start moving, and there are no pauses. The only pause you get is when you come through a sequence of sun salutations and you end up in a down dog. That's your pause for about 5 breaths, and then it's moving again. So it's static maybe, flow, and full on. And the interesting thing is if you take those 3, which is why I teach those here in Esencia, is the Hatha class is slower. So beginners think that's the best class for them. But in reality, a beginner's mind can't be slow. So most beginners jump into a vinyasa class because they get in there and they move their body and they don't have time to think and they just do this thing and then they jump off the mat and they go on with the rest of their day. Lots of injuries happening because of that. And everybody that's on the basic path in the yoga world today thinks if they've been practicing for a year or 2, they're advanced. You don't even get to an intermediate mindset until you've practiced for 10 years. And when you practice for 10 years, you realize you're not advanced at all. You probably should be in the Hatha class and go back to digging into the details. So there's this whole misconception about it all, that it's like slow, medium, fast. You might want to think about that as a student jumping into a class. Am I going to survive it or not? But the slow class is actually harder to do. You have to be connected to your body. You have to listen to what's going on. In the faster class, you do a pose and hold it for a breath, and then you move on to another pose, and you haven't even really explored that posture. So the faster class, when you do a more fast-paced class, you need to be set in a pose immediately. There's no time for fidgeting or fussing around or deciding whether you're going to move your foot right, move your foot left. No, it has to be on. So yeah, it should be considered more of an advanced class. The faster the pace, the less holding time is because you don't need to hold it as long because you already have done this pose 1,000 times. And then the one in the middle is where I tend to teach, because that's the most accessible to the general public. It's a little bit of pausing and it's a little bit of flowing. So students walking in for the first time, I kind of explain that to them, and their mouth opens and they're like, really didn't get half of that. And I say, you know what, come to the middle range. Come to the middle range, and then let's decide if you want to go to the slower class or the faster class. See how you feel. Enjoy the journey, enjoy the path. This is something you can do for the rest of your life. And especially if you learn from a teacher that will keep your practice sustainable. That's my goal, is keep the practice sustainable for whatever you are in your life path right now, injured or not injured, athlete or not athlete, but for it to be sustainable. You can do the pose out of alignment maybe 100 times and it's not going to affect you. But if you're going to sustain this practice and you're going to do those poses thousands of times and you're not stacked in your bones, drawn in where you need to be contracted or activated in the muscles and relaxed on the other side, it's not sustainable. So my goal is really to create a sustainable practice at whatever level each student is at the moment. And with thinking of bodies like buildings, I can teach the very first student that walks in the door for the very first time, and I'm like the auctioneer auctioning off the next move and the next move and the next option. And if people are intermediate, they'll come about halfway, and then there might be some advanced people in the room, and I'll keep offering and offering and offering till I get those people to their maximum. Meanwhile, everybody else is holding and building muscle memory and learning about their own practice. I started off very classic Bikram style, and it's hatha. And it's one pose, pause, second set of the pose, pause. So there's not a lot of fluid movement in hatha. And with the Bikram sequence, it's geared toward everyone being able to do the poses. If it's taught from the ground up, like from the feet to the knees and so on. The evolution that happened with me from Bikram, then my teacher Jimmy Barkan added some sun salutations because we felt like, in the Bikram sequence there were no sun salutations, no up dogs, no down dogs. I practiced for 10 years and never did an up dog or a down dog. It's not the most important pose that we practice. But we did feel, or my teacher Jimmy Barkan felt, it was important to get some more upper body strength. So we added the sun salutations to the Bikram sequence, and we started to evolve and sort of shape shift that original sequence. And it turned into a sequence that I like to call more a hot yoga with heart feeling. Because Bikram can be really choppy, militant, very directive. The dialogue is always the same wherever you go, and that works in the beginning of a practice. You need to hear it over and over again and habitually practice the same pose over and over again and learn to feel from the inside out and get the juice of the pose. But then there comes a time that it needs to evolve. As I started to teach and watch the form of the sequence and how it was shaping up, it started to feel like it should flow more. So I evolved into what I like to call a hot yoga with heart flow. So it's kind of like how you learn with any teacher in this path. You learn from your teacher, and then you evolve, and then you then teach, and then students learn from you. So it's the teacher-student relationship that's always growing and shape-shifting and transforming the path, or maybe even the style of yoga.